So today's Terraria episode is going to be a little bit different than the previous ones that I've done for the Calamity Summoner series. So usually I'm playing the game and it's live and I make a bunch of jump cuts as I'm making progress on boss fights and collecting random crap that isn't exciting to watch. But today I'm actually just showing you footage from my hour and a half of attempts against Supreme Calamitas tonight. It was actually more like an hour, but it took me an hour and a half to do because I had to step away from the computer a few times. And the unfortunate thing is I've taken a couple days off from Terraria, which means a lot of this time has been getting back into the swing of things. However, I just don't have time, and I'm kind of done tonight, in general. So I'm not going to make a typical Terraria episode. But that said, we're going to talk about Supreme Calamitas and what I've learned in the fight and the progress that I am making. So that way, when we get the kill, we can kind of compare what I've changed and how it's going, essentially. So first thing, let's talk about my gear and what I've basically landed on after about an hour of experimenting, which is that the Yaron Dragon Staff is just way too good. We have to use it. There is no other option for us at this point in the game. It is our only choice. Now, if we killed the Exomechs, that would change things up a tiny bit, but for the most part, I think it would remain mostly the same. And I do want to address some comments that I've been getting about different gear choices and whatnot, because it's possible that when, the people who are making these comments played last, things were a little different. It's not quite the way that it works anymore. So I'll get to that in a moment as far as different gear selections and which boss to kill first. However, like I said, the Kindle Staff, way too freaking good. It is... basically we're running the accessory with it, so we get 4 of them, and then that gives me 1 extra minion slot, so I run one of the UFOs. I've tried one of a bunch of different other minions. The UFO seems to be the most consistent as far as keeping its damage output up, so that's definitely a thing that I've tested and consider what I'm using right now to be the best. I could get an additional minion slot, so I could have 2 UFOs if I use the Profane Guardians, but it just doesn't really seem to be as good as some of the other accessories. So let's talk about accessories. The one that reflects projectiles is really good. I like that one a lot, but the cooldown on it is quite high. So I'm not getting a bunch of value out of it. I mean, I'm using it every single time it's off cooldown, basically, but I'm not getting enough value out of that one accessory slot. And what I've settled on is, I don't remember the name of it, the blood something or other, blood god's favor, I don't know. It's a trinket that you have to make. It's an accessory you have to make. And it increases your life by a bunch, and it increases your healing that you get from your healing potions, and it also increases or decreases enemy contact damage, which is pretty marginal for this fight. You're not really getting contact damage a lot of the time because the boss likes to kind of keep you at arm's length. However, it is nice for the off chance that it does charge you, and it has a fairly long cooldown, but you don't really need that cooldown to begin with because you're not really getting hit by the boss in that manner. The other change that I've made is I've got rid of the boots and I'm just using Drew's wings. This is actually a suggestion one of you guys brought up in a previous episode, and I tried it out both ways a couple times, and I think that I like the wings a bit more. Reasoning why. The wings give you extra flight time, so I'm not having to reset my flight nearly as often, which is really important for dodging crap in this particular fight. And the boots move you way too quickly. It's actually really annoying. You constantly are like accidentally running into crap with the boots. Plus, you don't need the extra speed. You don't need the speed in this fight. You just need precision. And the more that you can get precision, the better you end up doing in the fight. So yeah, that's kind of my changes that I've made. I've tried a bunch of the other accessories. I think there are plenty of options here that might be pretty good. I've tried Yaram's Gift. I actually think Yaram's Gift with the Rampart of the Deities might be pretty good, but there's just like a whole bunch of reasons why that's not working for me. And the chief among them is I kind of just really like running the dragons. They do so much damage, and if I try to run any other combination of accessories, I got to get rid of other stuff, and that's just not working for me. So yeah, that's my current gear setup. Now let's talk about mechanics. Or actually, before I do that, and before I forget, your guys' suggestions on what I should be killing first, whether it be the Exomex or Supreme Calamitas, are actually kind of unfounded for a couple of you. So the reasons for the killing Supreme Calamitas first that I've heard is that I can then get, there's like this sword summon, and there's a bunch of other stuff that you could potentially craft. However, you can't make that stuff in this current version of Calamity until you also kill the Exomex. You have to have Drayden's Forge to craft the stuff from Supreme Calamitas to begin with, and you get the Drayden's Forge from the Exomex. So that kind of screws you out of any potential like crafting upgrades. So basically, most of the stuff that you're getting from both the Exomex and Supreme Calamitas are post both of those bosses, because you need stuff from Supreme Calamitas and you need the Drayden's Forge plus a couple things from Exomex. So basically anything I'm getting from these bosses is pretty marginal to help the other one. There's a handful of things here and there that might potentially help, which is why I was saying at the beginning that the changes that we would make after we kill one of these bosses are fairly minimal, but they would help. So that's why I am focusing down this one, which is weird because in the past I would have focused down the Exomex first, but I'm having a lot of fun. You can quote me on that later. I'm having a lot of fun learning this boss, minus the annoyances of these RNG projectiles. Now, this is a good segue to talking about said projectiles. I've gone on and on about how I don't like the RNG of this fight, and I've had a couple comments saying that it's a skill thing, it's not an RNG thing. Like, you have to be able to dodge a bullet hell, and you know the RNG doesn't factor that much into it. But that's actually not true, and it's and I have actual verifiable evidence to show you for that, which is just watch my movement during these bullet hell phases. There's one thing in particular I want to point out. And it'll be hard to notice on some attempts. Mostly the attempts that I either fly up really quick or drop really quick, you'll see it the most. You'll see the effect of it the most. And it's not necessarily those extreme effects that are happening. Again, I'll get to that in a moment. It's just the very subtle effect of how these projectiles are spawned and how they are treated within the fight. So you can essentially change or manipulate the spawning of the projectiles, even though it may not seem like it at first blush. Those of you who have probably done this fight enough know what I'm talking about. Those of you who have watched enough of my attempts probably have seen it. Maybe you've not been able to put it into your own words though. So the projectiles have a logic for their spawning, and this is based on pure attempts and playing the mod more so than actually knowing how they're doing this. Although I do have game design experience, so I'm able to ascertain just kind of what they're doing here. So the projectiles have a logic for their spawning, which is dictated based on the player's position. So it is trying mostly to spawn off screen, but not very far off screen. In fact, I'm sure if you were able to zoom out the game a bunch, like a lot, you would be able to see this effect happen very, very clearly, because they are spawning randomly. Yes, it is a random RNG again, but I went back to, there is RNG here. It spawns randomly in a set parameter around the player. Sometimes this means that they bunch up in weird ways. It's rare that it happens, but sometimes they bunch up in weird ways. More often what you see are impossible paths that you just cannot make it through because of the random nature. Now, these often occur whilst moving. I'll get to the criticism of needing to move less during this bullet hell phase in a moment, because there's another key thing there that I'm not going to touch on just yet, so put a pin in that one. However, the thing to know is that if you are ever moving up really quick or down really quick, you will influence the spawning of these projectiles in a way that causes a wall of hurts, is what I'm going to call it, where they spawn in basically an impenetrable wall, and unless you use a teleport to get through them, you're going to get hit. It's just the way that the logic seems to coincide with the player's movement speed sometimes, especially at the start or the end of one of these bullet hell phases. It's really annoying. It's really annoying because you have no control over it. And in a true bullet hell, there are patterns, like for example, the big like explosion of projectiles that start on a little projectile and then move outward. That is a pattern. You can dodge that. You can predict that, and that's fine. When you hear the explosion somewhere off screen, you can usually predict where those are coming from and be able to move accordingly. However, the vast majority of the projectiles during this fight do not do that. They spawn randomly again around a set point, the perimeter of the player, and because they are spawning randomly, you get random patterns and sometimes impossible patterns, and that's really where my frustration comes from. Some people have pointed out that during these bullet hell phases, I'm moving too much, which actually is you are correct, but you're also incorrect in some way. So the reason you're correct is because by moving, I am creating additional randomness to the pattern of these projectiles. However, if you're starting to learn that particular spawning pattern and how they behave, you can influence it enough to give yourselves positions where you can get through the bullet hell because you're moving away far enough that they don't spawn immediately where you're going to, so you have kind of like an open area. You'll notice this most when you use like the normality relocator and you teleport across the perimeter of the fight, and there's a bunch of other ways to be able to see this through different movement. Chief among them is the weapon called the Final Dawn from the Rogue, which you hold, you charge up, and then when you let go, you go like spinning, you like fly. It's almost like a charge through the air, and it gives you immunity frames while you're doing so. That's what I was using on this fight as a rogue in my rogue series, and I don't think there's any other way for me to do it. Like that is such a good way to prevent damage because you just immunity frame through like all of these projectiles. However, I don't have that as a summoner, so I'm not able to do that. So moving around in a particular fashion that I'm doing often opens up avenues that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I am using my movement to actually give me less projectiles to dodge in particular parts of these bullet hells. Finally, when it comes to that, you also have the final couple phases where you have to move. You literally have to be moving, and the reason why is because you have these giant moons that are flying at your face, and if you stand still, they will kill you. They will straight up just kill you. So you have to be moving, and you have to be trying to keep them at arm's length in a way, and you have to move in a pattern, because if you move randomly and you're not like in a circle or something like that, they're going to split, and it's going to make it even harder to dodge those things and to avoid them. So that's kind of basically all of my learnings as far as the projectiles go. I'm moving anyways because I'm going to have to in the last part of the fight. Although there's minimal amount of projectiles that you're dodging that are like the randomly spawning ones. In the final phases, it's mostly the big explosion of projectiles that come that you have to filter your way through. But the location of which the moons spawn based on where you are in the arena can really screw you over, because they are also random and they can show up randomly in like different spots. Now they have like again a spawning parameter to them. They're not going to just spawn all straight on top of each other. However, they're mostly spread out, so depending on where you're at, like I said, you can really screw yourself over, and you kind of have to use your normality relocator sometimes, or your Rod of Discord sometimes. Unfortunately, then that screws you over for later in the fight. So all of that to say, I am making a lot of progress. Hopefully some of this information helps you guys potentially get further into the fight. I'm feeling like I should be able to kill it within the next day or two if I just kind of keep this up. So look forward to that video going out. This isn't feeling like the rogue that I had played with in the previous Calamity series where it just felt kind of impossible to a degree. That was really annoying. Like I felt like I could have done it and I got really close a couple times, but I felt like those were fluke attempts and I never ended up killing Supreme Calamitas, although the boss was definitely overtuned at that point and was much harder, as you guys have both pointed out, and I've gone and verified the nerfs that have happened since then. So if you have any other tips, definitely leave them in the comments. Your stuff, whether it ends up being helpful or not, it often is helpful in, or actually I should say it this way, whether I end up using your tip or not, it ends up being helpful regardless, because I read it and it gives me different things to think about, and that often leads me down the path that I'm going to choose to do the fight, or to finally complete it. So these little tiny tips that you give, whether, like I said, they end up making it in the fight or not, or if I end up showcasing it or not, then it still ends up helping me. I read every single comment that comes through. So there's a bunch of helpful stuff that I end up taking from your comments and then just tweaking or utilizing in some small way in order to actually get the kill on the boss. But with that being said, we'll come back the next time the boss is dead. I actually don't intend to make another Terraria video until the boss is dead, so you may see some other stuff on the channel in the meantime, but I think that's totally fine to get some variety going. I am also doing a bit of research that you guys don't see because I haven't done any videos on it, on which mod I'm going to end up doing next, and I can say that I'm really excited for what I potentially will do. I still may do a vote based on my own split decision that I have going on. But hopefully the next time you see me, we'll be down one less Supreme Calamitas.